I've maintained for a long time that the most important thing going on in Cardano right now, probably in all of 2023 and 2024, is Voltaire. It is self-governance. This is something that we can very easily mess up. This is something that could doom us to a spiral of failure, or it's something that could propel us to the next level and distinguish us even further from all of our competitors. And in that context, we've talked a lot about SIP 1694 and the roles of the Constitutional Committee and the DREPs and the SPOs, but we haven't talked a lot about the members based organization. If you've ever noticed that in all futuristic movies, the most evil legislative bodies always seem to meet in the most ivory white looking buildings, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. There's been a mystery in Cardano governance for some time. We have kind of a, somewhat clear idea about how SIP 1694 is going to work, and that seems to be directed at sort of the formal voting on different issues. And we've talked all about how the Constitutional Committee and the DREPs and the SPOs, how they'll interact with each other and what roles they'll fill, who gets to vote when, how the delegation of the DREPs might work. We've talked about a lot of those different kinds of issues. But then there's also been this other thing, this other entity sort of looming in the mist. I'll say the mist, not the shadows. Mist sounds a little less nefarious. And I don't think it's nefarious. I was just joking about the evil lawmaking entities always meeting in the extremely white architecture type buildings. I don't think Intersect is nefarious, so I'll say they've been looming in the mist in that we didn't really know what the members-based organization was going to look like. And in fact, we didn't even know the name until it launched, and we found out it was going to be called Intersect. And it looks like this says Intersect Uniting the Cardano Ecosystem. So this is interesting because we now have a website, and it tells us not a lot, but a little bit. But we did learn a little bit more about Intersect from another source that we'll discuss in just a second. But the website first. The website says, building together to drive Cardano forward. Yep, sounds great. Intersect is a member-based organization for the Cardano ecosystem, putting the community at the center of Cardano's development, advancing progress at the intersection of Cardano and its community. I would argue that Cardano and its community are one. They are the same. Intersect empowers a distributed network of builders and contributors to share in the belief that every voice holds value and that building together is stronger. Members forge a secure collaborative ecosystem to ensure Cardano's sustained growth and evolution in a safe space. And you can be part of Intersect right there. This is not any kind of organization that you cannot join. So it says R1 is made of many, maintaining Cardano's core infrastructure, core technology, and developing a roadmap for the future attracts a diverse group of stakeholders. And it looks like they've got a bunch of stakeholders here. And there's a bunch of entities you might recognize and a bunch that I myself don't even recognize. So there's a few here I definitely know and a few I don't. Okay, that sounds okay. Latest from Intersect. Why don't we just skip directly to the About section? Because that's really what we want to know at this point, right? What is Intersect? What are we even talking about here? What is a members-based organization? I've never been a part of a members-based organization. I'll bet many of you haven't either. Okay, so this is a lot of the same information, but then down here we get some more actual info about what this thing is. Intersect is a member-based organization. We know that for Cardano, tasked with ensuring its continuity and future development. Okay, now things are coming into focus. So one of the things I've been spending a lot of time thinking about, and I'll even admit worrying about over the last couple of years, has been, at what point does IOG step back? And I know this is actually a pretty frequent topic of conversation throughout the community, with a lot of people sort of cheering for IOG to step back because they think that represents a step toward decentralization, and it does. But I've been worried about I haven't been worried about how long that would take. I've been worried about it actually happening because IOG has put a huge amount of intellectual energy into the architecting of our ecosystem. If they step back, who takes over that role? And it seems like it's starting to come into focus that would be Intersect. So this could be good or bad. It just depends on how good Intersect ends up being at doing that job. And right there, here they're telling us that it will be tasked with ensuring the continuity and future development of the Cardano ecosystem. Those are the two things I've looked to IOG for in the past. And I'm not trying to short the Cardano Foundation and Emergo in any way. It's just that IOG has done, the bulk of that in the past. Made sure that Cardano continues and worried about future development. So this is new info. This is a pretty big step. Bringing members together behind a shared vision. Okay, great. Intersect enables a more resilient, secure, transparent, and innovative Cardano ecosystem that puts members in the driving seat. Okay, this is probably all true. I think if you're in crypto, you probably agree that decentralization makes things more resilient. It makes them less fragile, makes them more secure, and it certainly often makes things more transparent. And I believe decentralization leads to more innovation in the same way that if you crowdsource a bunch of a question, if you're on a game show and you get to ask the audience is oftentimes more correct than any individual competitor on the game show would be. So this makes sense to me. It worries me. Obviously, it all depends on how good Intersect is at doing these jobs. We hope that Intersect is at least as good as IOG has been, but that's a question mark. Why Intersect? The opportunity to maintain Cardano's core technology and develop a roadmap for the future attracts a diverse group of stakeholders. That will certainly be true. As a natural aggregation point, a Cardano town square, Intersect allows for those firms and organizations making the most significant contributions to the ecosystem to raise and elevate their voices on how Cardano's technological underpinnings can and should evolve. So already I've got a couple of questions. So I understand that it looks like Intersect is supposed to take over IOG's tasking with continuity and future development, but where do we draw the line between what the community does in SIP 1694 type processes and what Intersect is going to be doing? Because I think, the self-governance components in SIP 1694 are also meant to ensure continuity and future development. I think we'll get to something else in a little bit that might explain a little bit where that dividing line might be. It's still a little unclear, but where that dividing line might be. So it being a Cardano Town Square sounds great. There's also the second question. So there's a lot of talk about technological underpinnings and things like that. So how much is Intersect going to be focused just on, the sort of tech issues, what languages, what programming languages are involved in the Cardano ecosystem, those kinds of questions, and how much is it going to be focused on the kinds of policy stuff? So this could be one way we differentiate what Intersect is going to be doing and what the DREPs, the Constitutional Committee, and the SPOs might be doing in their roles in SIP 1694. So obviously you could say maybe Intersect is doing the micro stuff. Maybe Intersect is kind of like the administrative arm, sort of like Congress can't pass all the possible laws. So it's got all these agencies that also, make decisions on a more micro scale. And then Congress in the US is making decisions on, kind of a macro policy scale. Maybe there's that kind of division. We've also got this technological division. Maybe Intersect will be doing very tech oriented, fine grain stuff. And, the SIP 1694 entities would be doing, sort of like the non-technical stuff, the more policy-oriented stuff. There's a lot of different ways this could be divided. It's just a little bit unclear at this point. So Intersect supports the continued growth of a decentralized and inclusive self-sustaining system by providing additional governance processes and structure that enable the Cardano community to continue to advance the protocol together. This includes maintenance, development, testing, fundraising, infrastructure, and support initiatives, all initiated and driven by committees and working groups. Okay, so this is starting to look a little bit more like this is sort of the administrative arm. This is all the agencies, this is the SEC and the CFTC. Maybe those are bad examples in crypto because we have a very adversarial relationship with the SEC, certainly. But you can imagine maybe this is, sort of like the agencies in something like the US government, whereas the DREPs, the Constitutional Committee, and the SPOs are more like the Congress. That would make sense because the DREPs aren't going to have time to do all this fine-grained stuff, and we definitely need some arm of Cardano self-governance to do that. So maybe this makes sense. Although some of these, and this also tells us it's not just about the tech things, because fundraising, certainly we don't think of that as, certainly it's going to involve tech, surely, but we don't think of that as a purely technological undertaking. Fundraising, that's a pretty big, macro policy thing, but, maybe they're just executing on the fine-grained details behind fundraising. This makes it sound more like this is the administrative arm doing all the agency type stuff and not necessarily, setting the really big policies. But we can also go over here to get involved. Let's see what it looks like when they explain to us what's actually going to happen. And again, we see a lot of entities we're familiar with. Certainly Summon, Clovernodes, Liquid. I think I'm familiar with a bunch of these, and some of them I can't even name what they actually are, but I recognize their logos, kind of. So we know what some of these are. Why be a part of Intersect? So shape the future, guide the strategic direction of Cardano by participating in steering groups, committees, and advisory boards. More on these committees and steering groups in just a second when we talk about our other source of information about Intersect right now. As a founding member, establish new committees and shape the future of Cardano's governance. Okay. Develop and build, access grants and work packages to continue to develop Cardano's code base and build the next generation of the blockchain. Help guide a comprehensive grant program with fellow members to support and enhance the protocol and ecosystem. Yeah, this is sounding very agency-esque and also kind of technical oriented when they're talking about, developing the code base. Collaborate with a diverse network of like-minded professionals dedicated to ushering in a brighter Cardano future. Work with other members to strengthen connections. Okay, yeah, networking, great. Showcase your contributions and successes in the Cardano ecosystem through member events. Okay, this is sounds a little bit more like, networking kind of stuff. Founding member opportunities. Okay, co-design, Intersect, starting with committees and working groups, exclusive access to new grant program. Well, that I don't know about that part. Like, should only the MBO members have access to the grant program? Should only they have exclusive access? I don't know about that part. I'd have to see how that works in practice. Marketing opportunities at Intersect events, special acknowledgement as a founding member, and there's more to come. Okay, so if we go over here, what does this look like? Develop and build. Okay, same kind of things. Elevate your profile. I don't think you could see that screen, but let's go over here. So here's the sign up form. If anybody wants to be a part of Intersect, here's the sign up form. You basically give your info and then tell them what you want to be a part of. If you could tag a domain area of your organization or contribution, what would they be? And it goes through all the possible sort of areas you might want to be involved in a crypto ecosystem. But let's go to our second source of information of exactly what Intersect's going to be doing. Here's that second source of information I kept referencing. This is the most recent video from Charles. This is after he came back from all of the Voltaire workshops in Scotland and also after his trip to Papua New Guinea. So he had been away for a long time, and I think he did one video prior to this one, but this is the most recent one. And he talks a lot about Voltaire and especially about the members-based organization. So he starts off by saying, hey, we're about to get Node 8.2, which will carry SanchoNet. So this will be coming soon, SanchoNet. And this will flesh out a full implementation of SIP 1694 and will allow people to test out being a DREP, submitting a constitutional update, writing all kinds of software related to being a DREP. And I believe this is going to be the Sancho testnet, of course. They're not talking about launching all these things now, like everything else in Cardano, as things should be in a crypto ecosystem. There's going to be a testnet beforehand, so we can do some testing, of course. So then he got to Intersect, and he mentioned that 150 parties have already joined Intersect. He said people, but I'm assuming those are going to be individuals and companies because you can join as either. And then he got down to a little bit more detail, a little more fine-grained detail about Intersect. He said, Within IOG currently, within the IOG dev teams, they have different tribes. He used that term tribes. They have different tribes for things like side chains, the core ledger, Voltaire, smart contracts. And what they're talking about right now is having committees at Intersect that will manage the project backlog of these teams. So these teams all have, a list of things they're going to work on next. This like backlog of projects they should be working on next. And these have been IOG teams up till now, and so of course it was IOG determining what was going to be on this backlog of projects. But going forward, it sounds like what he's talking about is committees at Intersect. You remember from the Intersect website, they talked about steering committees and committees. These committees would determine what projects would be on those lists that these different teams would be working on. He said a lot of IOG projects are currently in Jira and they would have to migrate to GitHub. But all in all, this really sounds like a wholesale decentralizing and open sourcing of Cardano core development. This is great. One of the big, I would say, benchmarks of a young ecosystem is that one or more of the founding entities are controlling the core development. You don't have, totally open source, decentralized development of the core code, this sort of core infrastructure of the ecosystem. And that's certainly been the case with Cardano. I don't think anybody's going to pretend like IOG hasn't done the vast, vast majority of, basically all of the core infrastructure development. Charles is also talking about IOG being able to do more building on top of Cardano. And it sounds like because of this, with IOG being able to step out of this role that the MBO, that Intersect would be filling, IOG might have more time to build some of the projects on top of Cardano they've always wanted to. He mentioned Midnight and RealFi in this context. Midnight, of course, is the privacy-focused side chain that would ride on top of Cardano. I don't want to imply that it's some kind of a scaling level layer 2, but a side chain of Cardano. And then you've got RealFi, which is just sort of a whole category of real world finance we've always talked about building in the Cardano ecosystem. Charles characterized Intersect as a way, and here this is the important part where I think he's really trying to explain what Intersect is really going to be doing, but he characterized Intersect as a way to debate and then ratify a certain vision, and then let the community vote on whether that vision makes sense. So I always think about the word ratify a little bit differently. I would sort of think about ratify as being sort of the thing that happens after the vote. But I think what he's saying is Intersect would come along and they would be doing, this sort of adding projects to the backlogs of these teams and sort of forming sort of a vision, a direction for Cardano development. And then the community would vote on whether or not that vision is good. They could sort of ratify the decision of Intersect, or they could say, actually, we prefer to go in this other direction. Or maybe they would decide, he even mentioned, it could even be a hybrid of what it sounds like Intersect, the course that Intersect had sort of charted, and some other course that someone else, had proposed. So it's a little bit unclear. It's a little bit hazy, how exactly this would happen. But it sounds like Intersect would be kind of in the position you would expect if you think about it in terms of like a Congress and an administrative sort of arm of a government. Certainly in the US government, for example, you've got agencies sort of giving their opinion to Congress saying, hey, on this particular topic, which falls within the wheelhouse of our agency, we really recommend you go in this direction. I could see Intersect doing something like that, saying to the community, hey, we really recommend you do the following. We really recommend you put some energy into building out this type of sidechain, or we really recommend you build out this client in this language or something like that, or support, smart contracting language support, for this language, whatever it is. I could see Intersect being the body that recommends those kinds of things. And then the community votes yay, nay, yes, no, or actually we like this other idea, or actually we like a hybrid between what you suggested, Intersect, and this other proposal that came out of the blue, maybe from just some random member of the community. I don't know if that's exactly how it's going to work, but that kind of makes sense to me because it solves this big problem. The big problem, the big nightmare that occurred to me the second I read the SIP 1694 proposal was, okay, this is actually pretty good. This looks pretty good, SIP 1694. As far as a voting, a protocol for voting, a bunch of processes for voting, this looks pretty good. And I like the checks and balances of this tricameral kind of body with a constitutional committee, DREPs, and SPOs all having different rights to vote on different things. That looked pretty balanced, actually. And it's a pretty easy thing to mess up. So it looked like a pretty good process, but I was left with this nightmare about where the proposal would come from and how good the proposals would be, sort of like the quality and quantity of the proposals. Because if everybody in the community, if all the proposals were just sort of sourced from the community, you would get a huge number of wild proposals. And I'm sure we will have that. And it's not, wouldn't necessarily be the case that we would have a high quality of proposals, because I think you really need, if you want high quality proposals to chart the course for an entire ecosystem, you kind of need a professional entity with, high caliber expertise sort of charting that course. And my big fear was, if IOG steps away, who fills that role? Because certainly within IOG, we have a lot of incentive, because IOG obviously holds ADA. They obviously have a vested interest in the ADA community, ADA ecosystem, and they've also got a high level of expertise. I don't think anybody knows more about Cardano and proof of stake and, Ouroboros and, Plutus and smart contracting in a proof of stake context, all of these things. Permissionless self-custodied staking. I don't think anybody knows more about those topics than IOG probably. So if IOG were to step away, this is a nightmare. If the community is if suddenly it's just random guy, who we know from Twitter saying, actually, I think we should go in this direction. And then, them, due to maybe charisma only, being able to sway the vote in that direction could turn out to be a terrible direction. So it is kind of a big relief, I think, to know that if IOG were to step back a few paces, it wouldn't be just to leave us to a free-for-all. Certainly there is beauty in everybody in the community being able to propose something to, to the tricameral voting body in 1694. And I still get the impression that that will be the case. But we'll also have this more professional body that will have a certain level of, it will contain a certain level of expertise and, just be more of a professional organization, also proposing a sort of vision for the future of Cardano. So I think we're going to find out a lot more about what Intersect does and how Intersect's going to interact with the different entities in SIP 1694. But I actually think this is a very good development. And it looks like anybody can join Intersect. Like anybody can join Intersect. It looks like there might be some kind of, when I went through the some of the website, some of the web pages, it looked like there might have been a fee attached to being a member of the Intersect MBO. But it does look like it's permissionless so far. So I think this is a positive development. I'm looking forward to finding out more. I hope you had a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.